we are back. Excellent. So I've mixed this into what hopefully resembles fine breadcrumbs. And as I say, I did it with my fingertips so that it's kept nice and cold. And you can see, what you can do is just bring your hands through, your fingertips through it, and give it a little cuddle. And any lumps will come to the top that haven't been worked in. Right, next thing we need to do is sugar, which is already mixed in with the custard powder, should you be using it. Okay, so we just throw that in there and then just stir it in to make sure it's all distributed evenly. Okay, there we have it. Don't need to do that, but I like the sound of it. Okay. Right, so we need our egg and buttermilk mixture, which has been sitting in the fridge, staying nice and cold. Here it is. I'm just going to give it a final quick whiz with my trusty mixer, just to make sure it's nice and frothy. There we are. Just get rid of those. Tidy up as you go along. There we go. Right, so all of this can now go in here. Oh, look at that froth. Absolutely lovely. So just scrape it all in. Don't waste any eggs. Any of the eggs. The chickens have worked really hard to get those out, so we don't want to throw it away. And using my palette knife, I know on the recipe we've got a spatula or a palette knife. Just depends what you've got. I find a palette knife, for me, I find it easier because you can cut through and mix this together. Now, first of all, it's going to look a little bit gloopy, lumpy, gooey. And then as you keep cutting through, just start coming together. And don't forget, we've always got that little bit of leftover buttermilk that we can utilise should this be too dry. Because even though you always measure everything out the same every time, for some reason, unbeknown to me, sometimes it works perfectly and sometimes it doesn't. One of these alien things. Okay. So it's now just starting to come together. What you need to do is keep your hands out of it for as long as possible, because your hands are heavy-handed, in fact. And the more you mess about with the dough with your hands, the less it will rise. So the more you can just amalgamate it here, the better. Okay. That's coming together nicely. Now you do have to get your hands in, but gently. And this starts to pull together into a dough. And you can see it's starting to come into a ball. Now, if it is too dry, add a little bit of buttermilk, a little bit at a time. Don't put too much in because it's very easy to over-egg it. If it's too wet, you can sprinkle a little bit of flour on there, but again, a little bit at a time. There we go. This is now leaving the sides of the bowl nice and clean. So we're just about there. And then the next thing we want to do is to lightly flour our surface. And I have here a flour shaker. Belonged to my nan, I believe. So we just lightly flour. If you haven't got one of these contraptions, you can use a sieve. So you don't get a huge amount on there. You can use a sieve. You could also use a tea strainer. In fact, I've been known to do that. Bring this little ball of deliciousness out on there. And now we need to chuff it. And that is using the heel of your hand 3 or 4 times. Bring it together. Flip it over. Do it again. Now if you've got dirt grate hands, then you may only need to do about 2 or 3 each time. If you have dainty little hands, like moi, you may need to do 5 or 6 each time. But again, we're always trying to handle it as least as possible. And as you can see, it's now starting to look smooth, which is what we need. Okay, one more go. Okay, lovely. Here it is. Right, now what we need to do here is to make a little ball and then just flatten it out in a circle. Now you can roll it, you can use a rolling pin to roll it, but the trouble with using a rolling pin, I find anyway, is that you can tend to over roll. So you want this to be about 3 centimetres or 1.25 inches, I think. Here we have a ruler, 3 centimetres, which I believe is about 1.25 inches. You can always check it. There, look, around there. It's about 3 centimetres. That's not bad, is it? Okay. So now I'm just going to put a little bit more flour on there so it doesn't stick. We are going to cut it out. Now I have here a cutter that's about 2.5 inches, something like that, and a little bowl of flour. You can dip this into your bag of flour, but then you can end up with bits of uncooked scone dough in your flour. So I put it in a little bowl. It just needs to be deep enough to get your cutter in. And you dip your cutter in the flour and then straight down on the scone mix. No twisting, otherwise they will come out all over the place. And then we want to put them onto a baking sheet, which has again been sprinkled with a bit of flour. If your baking sheet tends to stick, you can put some baking parchment on there, not greaseproof paper, but baking parchment. And we just pop the scone on there. Back into the flour with a cutter, straight down, bump. And the flour on the cutter stops the scone from sticking to the cutter. So each time before you cut, pop it in the flour, straight down. There it comes, look at that. Fabulous. Now you can see I'm spacing these out because they will grow in the oven. And let's just gather up the bits, the leftovers. A couple of little chuffs and back into a circle, flatten it out. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, these are handmade, so doesn't have to be perfect size, they don't have to be totally uniform. In fact, I like it when they're not. So there we are, straight down, out it comes. Back on the baking sheet. Is there enough there? No, so I'm just going to gather it up again. Sometimes you're lucky and you can get a couple out of each bit of the leftover. Push it down with your hand, but not too hard. Again, the less you handle, the higher they will rise. So when you're patting the dough down, don't do it too hard. And with this size cutter, you should get 6 or 7 out of it, maybe 6 with a little runt. I'm probably fiddling with this too much because I'm chatting at the same time, but there we are. Straight down. And there's a little runt, so just roll it up into a sort of baby scone shape. There we are, that goes on too. Make sure there's plenty of room between your scones. Right, so what we will do now is we will just leave them to settle for about 30 minutes before you put them in the oven. That lets the gluten start to work from the flour, and that will give you a much better finish. See, that one's not as deep as those, but it doesn't matter. So we're going to let that sit for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to pop them in the oven.